Welcome to the Business Blueprint, where entrepreneurs and business leaders learn how to work smarter, scale faster, and build better.
Well, welcome back to the Business Blueprint. My name is Clay, joined as I am each and every time by Joe Sandine. Joe, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Joe is the founder, the president, the CEO, whatever your titles are on your business card over at OnSharp, and I am the marketing director over here. And here at the Business Blueprint, we like to talk about just helping entrepreneurs, business leaders, business-minded folks just think more strategically about their business. And on this episode, we're actually focusing on the customer. Without customers, your business is really just an idea. Might be a good idea, but the most critical part is you have somebody willing to exchange money for your goods and services. And if you lose sight of that, your business is going to stall. You'll plateau out. And eventually, you'll probably go under even. You cannot lose sight of the customer. So, Joe, we want to kind of think through what are some misconceptions that business owners, business leaders have regarding serving customers?
Yeah, so I think for me, what I've learned over the years is that, sometimes people say no news is good news, right? And I think in the world of working with customers, I definitely don't agree with that. So I think a lot of times we think that if the customer's not complaining, then everything's fine, everything's good, and they're happy. And I think that's dangerous to live in that world as a business owner. I know there was this term in the last couple of years when it came to like employees of quiet quitting, stopping working,
right.
And you don't realize that they're kind of quitting on you. I kind of use that term on the business side with customers too. I think you have to worry about, you might not be doing a good job, but a lot of people just don't like to complain. And so I use the term a lot around OnSharp of, we got to make sure our clients aren't quite quitting on us. Like they're what if they're not impressed? What if we're not hitting the mark, but they just don't want to, a lot of people just don't want to be a nag or complain about it. And their solution is going to be, I'm just going to go find somebody else to work with. Right. So I think a big misconception is assuming that unhappy customers will tell you. I think there's a lot of times customers are not happy and you never find out. So I think it's really important in a business to be really good at talking to the customer, getting feedback, like put in the energy to understand if you're doing a good job and don't just assume that no news is good news.
Yeah, I think we're all going to do what's easiest, and there's a lot of friction to complaining. You got to fill out a form. Maybe someone's going to call you. Mm-hmm. Like, it's awkward, especially I think in our particular area of the country. We don't want to do that. So I think that's a good point to keep in mind.
Midwestern nice kicks in.
Yeah, just because people aren't giving you bad reviews or complaining doesn't mean that they're happy. And what's likely to happen if you don't have kind of a really captive audience and you're the only option there is, which is almost never the case, they're just going to go find someone else to meet that need, mm-hmm. that product, that service, or whatever else. So you really do want to aim for happy customers. And we're going to kind of think through that a little bit. And from the marketing side of things, we run into that a lot too, is the customer has to be the hero in the story. Ultimately, and I think this is a huge problem that business owners, that marketers, owners get in the habit of, is thinking that the customer really cares about your business. And it's really hard for them to hear as they don't care about you. Like they don't care. They want their problem solved. They have a product they need to buy. They have a service they need done. They care about their need. And it's not being selfish. That's why they're in the market. And so a lot of times they get into this mindset, businesses get in this mindset of really putting themselves first in the story, in the narrative of the marketing and things like that. There's a helpful tool out there called StoryBrand by Don Miller. We've used it at OnSharp to kind of help craft that narrative of making the customer the hero of the story and the company, OnSharp or whoever you are, as the guide in that. You want to speak to a little bit the importance of just making sure that the customer, I mean, it's really cliche, customer's number one, but why is the customer being the hero in the story so important?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately you're there to solve a problem for the customer and make them happy. So, I do think that as businesses, we can really tend to get stuck in that rut of talking about ourselves too much. And I understand that, there's a reason to do it. I mean, you want to build credibility. You have to show people you have the experience. I mean, there's a certain amount of talking about yourself that is part of the equation, but oftentimes it can become way too much, way too heavily slanted to the point where the customer kind of like loses track of the fact that is it about me or is it about you? And so I do think at the end of the day, you've got to first focus on make the customer, you're trying to make them the hero. You're trying to solve their problem. That is the number one goal. And then everything that you have to do should be driving towards that. And if you do talk too much and focus too much on yourself and all your awards and how great you are and your process, like, do those things matter? Of course they do, but they come secondary to first just creating that initial connection with, am I really talking to your pain point? Do I really understand what your needs are? Am I making you feel heard? You talk too much about yourself, you never give the client a chance to explain what their problem is. It's no different than dating. You go on a first date with somebody, and if you sit there and you talk about yourself,
right,
90% of the time your date's sitting there thinking, like, do you even care about me and what I'm interested in? So I would apply the same rules to the business side.
Yeah, your messaging becomes really self-focused. And so now your ideal customer, your prospect, is hearing about when you were founded and in this process and why you're the best at this, how many years of experience you have, and all these things. What they need to hear is that you understand what their problem is, you know how to fix it.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose sight of it. What else happens when businesses make themselves the focus rather than the customer? What are some other negative elements of that?
Well, I think you end up doing a lot of things in your business that really don't matter. You put steps in your process that the client maybe doesn't appreciate. You actually make it harder and you create more friction, I think, for the customer because, again, you do what you think sounds cool, looks cool. These are all superficial things that you end up putting into the way your business operates. And if you don't gut check, if you don't make decisions that are driven by what the customer is asking of you, you end up creating all this complication in your business. And I love simplicity. So if you get overly complex with all these ways in which you operate, you end up, I think, again, you find out that the client feels like working with you becomes laborious or difficult, or, it slows things down. I think
Right.
clients appreciate just getting in and getting out and getting the job done. They're not trying to be married to you for their whole life. So, like, you're there to do the job, do it the way they want it, make them happy. And I think if you focus too much on yourself, you can end up adding a lot of cost and complexity to your business that just doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, I mean, you could introduce products, introduce services that they're not interested in.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have ideas of, you kind of have this idea of who you are as a company, but that's not why customers come to you. You get some examples,
Mm-hmm.
The Cracker Barrel's disastrous rebrand, things like that. People come to Cracker Barrel because of all the junk and stuff on the wall. For whatever, they want to feel like they're at a garage sale in the South when they're eating their fried okra.
No,
and whatever else.
you make a good point. You can end up adding a lot of things that you want to do for the customer that almost like take away from the thing you do best. So I think you have to be really careful to stay focused, stay in your lane. As business owners, we can tend to get bored with what we do. We can tend to like trivialize what we've figured out how to do really well. And I think one of the best things you can do as a business is do the boring stuff really, really, really well and do it for the long stretch. I hear a lot of people talk about, people pivot too much. They get bored with what they do. I think when you really figure out how to make your business tick, then you just got to bear down and just do it over and over and over and over and just keep getting better and better and don't get bored of it. Be willing to do the boring stuff for a really long time.
And so what are some other steps that you can take as a business to really align around the customer instead of being inward and self-focused? How can you make sure that you're not losing sight of that?
Yeah, you gotta talk to the customer. You gotta get feedback. You have to be constantly, whether it's getting reviews or calling on your customers or just going out to the market and talking to people. The minute you stop talking to your customer, that's when you start losing track of what they're actually looking for. So I think what the risk is, like you said, being too inwardly focused and starting to make decisions of what you think sounds good, or, it's okay when you start a business, you got to kind of start with customer feedback and some of what you think the right answer is. But once you have an operating business and you have real customers, the best way to know that you have good, fit with what your customer wants, just keep talking to them.
Yep. Yeah, and really at all levels of the business too. I mean, Zappos, one of the early pioneers and giants in e-commerce, selling shoes online. They very famously, every level of the company would spend time on the phones, taking customer requests, handling issues, all that stuff. So you want to make sure that you keep in front of the customer and then that you get that feedback and that filters through the rest of the company. So it's not just sales or just marketing or just your frontline employees hearing that information.
Yeah, and you make a good point at every level, because we all touch the customer in a different way, either in a granular way or at a high level way. And so everyone has to be focused on customer experience, because all the little things we do at all levels of a company, like they all are part of the equation when the customer thinks of like their happiness working with you, and if they're going to keep working with you as they go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So business owners, the main takeaway here, is, as hard as it is to hear, is that customers don't care about your company. No matter how great a brand you have, they care about solving their problem. And if you align around that, everything's going to improve. So when we get back on the other side of the break, we're going to talk about what it means to be easy to do business with and things you can do as a business to make sure that your customers enjoy doing business with you. We'll be right back for the Business Blueprint. Welcome back to this episode of the Business Blueprint. We're talking about how businesses can make sure they don't lose sight of the customer. And Joe, we want to talk about what it means to be easy to do business with. So how can a company, whether they're service-based, product-based, they've got a retail location, how can you make sure that you're easy to do business with? Because people aren't going to put effort into it. You'd have to have something amazing for them to go through a lot of hassle to do business with you. You want to be easy to do business with. How can you do that?
Well, there's a lot of ways, I think, to dissect that. I think if you're in the people business, I think it starts with having the right people on your team, having good, positive, pleasant, experiences. I always talk about when you walk into Shields, like everyone is so happy. They all greet you. Yep. They make sure that they're taking care of you. Like they do a really good job focusing on the people side of their business. And I think if you overlook that, that's a big mistake on the people side. Aside from that, I think it's just, generally speaking, don't make it feel like a job for me. Don't make it feel like I have to work hard to do business with you. So I think when you look at the customer experience in your company, you have to really pay attention to the little things that matter. Like there's all these little moments in an experience with a business where you can either make it painful or difficult or clunky for the client to work with you, or you can make it feel effortless. So I always talk about there's lots of moments of truth when a client works with a business where they're going to kind of formulate an opinion of what they think about you. So like when you're at a restaurant, for me, a big moment of truth is how fast do the drinks come right away? Or even like once we're seated, does it take a minute or 5 or 10 minutes for the waiter or waitress to even come over and acknowledge that we're there? Or when the food arrives, did they get all the orders right? So like, I just think you have to pay attention to the details. So if you're not a detail person, you got to learn to be, because it's all those little details that bundled up kind of become the entire experience.
And business owners, they need to understand, like, that's your brand. Your brand is what your customers think about you. So you can put all the marketing into it. You can have a great logo. You can design the interior restaurant all you want. But if your brand ultimately is the place that takes forever to get your food,
right?
Not all that is wasted money. And I think also, companies lose sight of the fact that this is a huge differentiator. It sounds stupid, but if you have everybody that's in the front line, whether they're answering the phones, they're your front desk person, or they're at the counter, whatever the business might be, if they are nice, polite people, it's ridiculous how big a differentiator that is now.
Well, and think how much more obvious and apparent that's become in the age of everyone being face in their screens.
Right.
I feel like we're all losing our
ability
to communicate with each other. No one wants to have face-to-face interaction anymore. Half the restaurants you go into anymore,
right?
They don't even cater to the customer that sits down at a table because everything's like
just the orders coming
picking up orders.
Yep.
And so it's going to be a bigger and bigger differentiator if you really have the customer service and the right people, and these are not rocket science things. These are really simple things. So.
Yep. And it's just about having standards, having a way to keep sight of that. You always kind of have the notion that, man, if the guy who owned this place walked in here, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't tolerate, someone not looking up when the customer gets in, or it being dirty or whatever else. There's probably an element of making sure you know what's going on in your own business. So obviously that's a big one. We all have horror stories, or going in some place and having rude service or whatever else. And there's also things that are just that they create friction. It's hard to do business with you. It's work for their customer. What are some ways that businesses unintentionally create that friction?
Yeah, I think that can really come out in your process. I think sometimes you get in this trap of you think that something should be done a certain way, but it's really counterintuitive to what the customer wants. And so I think it's very dangerous when you start putting your own roadblocks in the middle of the process. I mean, unless you're talking about things that are, have to be there for safety and security and regulations and whatnot, but it's your job to remove all that friction as much as you can.
Yeah.
So like, I think technology plays a big role in that. So, I mean, even little things like communicating with the customer on the channel they want to communicate on. So like, I could mandate that you must email me to request this or that. But man, if I was willing to take a text or a phone call or a WhatsApp message, I mean, so really getting in tune with like the technology systems that today's modern consumer uses, and if you can find ways to implement to make those things easier, I think that can really remove a lot of friction. So we get stubborn in our ways. I think as business people, we can tend to like, this is the way I do it, so this must be the way everyone wants it. And I think you have to realize we're all wired differently.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's other friction points. Obviously, speed is a big one, no matter what the nature is of your business. If it's slower than people expect, that's a problem.
Yep.
Unnecessary complexity. Well, it should, people, even if they're not really familiar with your industry, they've got a general idea of how the process should go. And every time there's an unexpected twist or turn, that's more friction. If there's confusion, if they've got to call someone, set up a meeting to get pricing, nobody wants to do that anymore. They want quick, clear information.
I think you have to, if you can ask what if, I think you got to look at your business and say, what if you could do it this way? Or what if we could remove that? Or what if it didn't have to be that way? I think you just got to keep constantly challenging yourself to remove steps and get to, the faster you can go from beginning of relationship to the customer receiving value, the bigger win you're going to have. I mean, the longer it takes for the customer to feel like they got something of value. That's why, like, if I'm sitting at a restaurant, if it took 15 minutes to get a drink, I didn't get any value until 15 minutes I was sitting there. And so that 15 minutes formed an opinion in my mind of what it's going to be like every time I go there.
And you also have to be cautious of just doing what everybody else is doing. I mean, we ran into this when we started launching our employee portal product at OnSharp. Every other employee portal, you got to set up a meeting with sales to find out how much this thing costs.
Yeah, they put a lot of roadblocks out there, and they want to control the process so much.
Right.
The customer feels like they're
for their
hamstrung.
company, that is helpful. That is, and we see the benefit of that. And so I think a lot of other companies look at that like, well, that's the way to do it. And we try to do something a little bit more customer focused. If people just want to know, they don't want to have to call somebody to find out if they're even interested in this price point of a product. So
another good example is when we build custom software and we take them through our discovery process and we understand their needs and we mock stuff up and we show them what it's going to look like. Well, what's the biggest value to the customer? Getting a visual of what this thing is actually going to look like. So if we can go from it taking 6 weeks or 4 weeks to give them a visual to giving them a visual within a week or two, totally blows their mind. Like, it totally elevates the experience because we're getting them to the finish line in their mind faster. So again, you just got to be willing to challenge the status quo in your business and not be afraid to put things on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So what are some things that happen when you get this friction out of the way? What are the benefits of that, both for the customer and for the business?
Well, man, everything just becomes easier. I mean, I think it becomes, when there's a lot of friction in the business, I think the biggest repercussion is I think you have a lot of churn. So you're going to have a lot of customers that didn't love it, and so they're not going to come back. So if you can get rid of the friction, make it easy, make customers fall in love with you, you're going to rely on much less new customer business. If you're constantly churning customers because they didn't love working with you, then think of how many net new customers you have to sell every week, every month, every year. And if you can really do an amazing job for every single customer that comes in your door, you're not going to have to depend as much on sales and marketing efforts. You're going to get more word of mouth. Everything's just going to become more fluid. So I think that's probably the biggest win that would come out of that.
Yeah, and there's that level of repeat business that comes from that is so important. and again, you could talk about plenty of horror stories with this example too, but there's a reason that when you get to some new city, you end up going to McDonald's because you know what to expect.
Right.
It's easy. You understand the process. You understand what you're getting. Yeah, quality has slid off the last, decade or so. But the example still stands. They built that business so well because it was easy. It was easy to do business with them. You knew what you were getting, and it was fairly consistent. So if you can make sure you're doing those things, again, it's easier to come back to the same place that you got your custom software, got your haircut, got your oil changed, did your lawn care service, it's easy just to stay with them unless that business gives you enough friction to cause you to want to do something else.
Well, yeah, and think of all these, additional products and services. So if they're loving the one thing they get from you, well, adding on a second and a third and a fourth the client's going to be looking at that because they're like, wow, if the experience of this first thing was so great, well, then doing the next thing is going to be the same experience. So yeah, it makes it easier to upsell.
So as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a business as a whole, you want to make sure that you are easy to do business with, and that's not always going to be the case. You're going to screw it up sometimes. You're going to make mistakes. So when we come back on the other side of the break, we're going to talk a little bit about how can you anticipate problems, how can you own mistakes and recover from them when they do occur. We'll be right back for more on the Business Blue. Welcome back. We're having a conversation about how to not lose sight of the customer. We've talked about how important it is to make it easy to do business with you, but we both know, Joe, sometimes things don't go the way we plan. Mistakes happen.
We are not perfect people.
That's right.
Sure. Yep.
So how can businesses anticipate problems before they occur? So they're not taken off guard when something goes off the rails. They've already planned for this.
Great question. I think a lot of that comes with experience. I think when you're young and early, I think you can be very naive and you don't understand what the problems are going to be. I'm 26 years into OnSharp and having this technology business, and I think I've learned to become good at spotting problems because I've had to deal with them many, many times in the past, and I've had to learn the hard lessons. And so I think nothing really replaces the experience of you've kind of been there before and you've seen the train go off the tracks, and you just become good at reading the situation. So if you're not good at that, I think you need to build a team around you that has some of that experience, maybe get a mentor that can help you. But I think a lot of it is just I've been through the mud before. I think that's how a lot of us on the OnSharp team, because we have a lot of experience, we can spot things coming around the corner that are going to be problematic. And then number two, I would just say, be good at reading people. I think you can tend to downplay some of the signs that you maybe get. Maybe somebody's tone or their eye contact, or they're not returning your phone calls, or suddenly their behavior changes. I think if you can be really good at reading people and understanding the psychological components of a business, I think you can get really good at understanding where the risks are and where you maybe need to correct.
Yeah. And one thing I like to emphasize, particularly with retail type locations, service level businesses, but it applies to everybody, is you need to sit down with a piece of paper and you need to map the entire process of doing business with you. Everything. Like, you can't skip a step, and then you need to figure out, okay, what might go wrong with that? So let's just take like an oil change, Valvoline or something like that, for example. Well, maybe it starts with a phone call to set an appointment. Maybe no one answers the phone. Okay, what are you going to do about that? Okay, you get an appointment. Maybe there's no appointments available. That's disappointing. What are you going to do about that? You show up, and they're busy. Your appointment didn't mean much. What are you going to do about it? It takes too long. You have to wait. They made a mistake. All these things you can map out. What is the expectation in this process? What are the steps to it? What might go wrong? And then you need to figure out, as you're anticipating those and seeing how to address those, you need to empower different people to fix those. We've all had experiences with you're at the hotel lobby desk or wherever else, where that frontline person has no power or authority to fix it. It's not their fault, but they haven't been empowered with, give them this coupon. You can adjust the price like that. That comes from the top down of anticipating those problems.
Having a good training program and making, and I think you make a good point when you're mapping out a process. I think you can end up being a little bit lazy and you only map the likely process. Oh, if everything goes fine, it's all going to go like this.
Right.
There's a lot of ways in which, if
you can go sideways.
You build a little tree structure of all the possible paths, you suddenly realize, man, there's 47 different ways this thing could shake out, and what are we going to do in every single situation?
And you're not in control of a lot of that. Technology fails. I mean, there a vendor that supplies some ingredient or some element into this process doesn't show up. Like, there's a lot of moving pieces, so you have to anticipate that. And we want to avoid mistakes all the time. We want to avoid problems, but that's not all negative. Why is it that problems is where trust can really be built?
Well, every business is going to make a mistake, whether it's a little one or a big one, and it doesn't really matter. And I think customers, don't all assume, maybe some do, but I think most of us have some tolerance for people who are going to make mistakes. It's how you respond to them. So I think you
Yeah.
really prove who you are and the kind of business you are by how you handle mistakes, how you handle difficult situations. So I think that's where you really have to train your team and build a culture around making the customer happy, doing the right thing. I think as long as you do the right thing and the client feels like you're really doing what's in their best interest, I think that's where you can still maintain trust even through a mistake or through a difficult situation.
Yeah, and you need a little bit of a feedback loop too. You need to make sure that those issues, those hang-ups, the friction that might be coming up is getting up the chain to the people that can make some changes in the structure, in the strategy, in the systems in place. So what happens when businesses that don't do a good job of recording, documenting, responding to problems?
I mean, you just lose customers. I mean, you suffer. It's pretty easy. I mean, word of mouth gets around, your reputation becomes bad. That's why it's so important to do the right thing. I mean, it is way more expensive to not do the right thing and save a buck.
Yeah.
Than it, because you're going to pay 100-fold the price in that person telling 10 other people how bad the experience was. I mean, take the short term. I mean, and you need to own the issue. I mean, if it was your fault and you did something wrong, own it. Doesn't matter how expensive it is. I mean, we've had issues in OnSharp's past where we didn't do things right and we owned it, and it didn't matter what the cost was. Like, we owned it, and it's just the way we're built. I mean, it's just in our DNA, and that gets into your morals and your ethics and that kind of stuff too. But you need to own your mistakes. That's the only way to build trust. If you run and hide and make excuses for when you make a mistake, those customers are never coming back.
Yeah. And it is remarkable that gets missed a lot. Companies don't realize that small little thing that they think is a really big deal that they're not willing to bend on. And I'm not talking about being a problem customer and a complainer or anything like that. I'm talking about a real situation has arisen where some product or service did not meet what was advertised, and they're not willing to make it right. And they don't understand that I'm never coming back. Mm-hmm. Like, lifetime value of the customer, you're going to lose out on that because you don't want to bend on something that costs you $4.13. Like, it's a remarkable
crazy.
calculation that's going
crazy.
on.
And again, more and more, I feel like we have those situations where I'm almost baffled the way the person that we're working with handles the situation. And I'm thinking, like, wow, like, really, you're not willing to make the right decision over such a dumb little thing, and now like I'm never going to come back to your store over that.
Yeah.
I'm a guy on principle too. Like, I don't care how much I love a place. If they break my trust, I'm just not going to go back. I'm going to find a different answer to the problem.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I'm not a complainer. If I order chicken, you bring me fish, I'll probably just eat it. Like, that's okay. I don't want to be a squeaky wheel.
And that's where we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
One of the biggest risks in your business is you don't even know that the customer's unhappy and they just never come back.
They never come back. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to tell you on the way out probably, but I'll never come back in. And
so you got to always do the right thing, even if the customer never asks you to.
Yep.
If you notice that something wasn't right, fix it.
Yep.
Doesn't matter if they don't complain about. I mean, too many people assume, they didn't complain, so they must not have noticed. So I'm not going to worry about it.
You got to be proactive.
Super dangerous.
You've got to be proactive. Yep. You have to be the one to speak to the problem first. Don't make them come to you. You need to recognize, this was supposed to be done by Friday. Here it is on Tuesday, and the customer doesn't have it. You call them.
That's a good point. I'm really big. Like, every little thing we say we're going to do is a little mini promise we're making. So if you're like, I'll get you an email by the end of the day, or I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. You need to do those things. And if you wait for the client to tell you, hey, were you going to get me that? You've already lost because now they have to babysit you.
Small little erosion of trust that okay, the next one, and it really adds up over time. And sometimes we just screw up. We overpromise, we underdeliver. Something happens on our end. We're people, we make mistakes. So how can you own a mistake well? I think lots of businesses are so afraid to just own it, apologize, say this was our fault. I don't know if we're too afraid of litigation or what the deal is, but there's a lot of companies that really seem reluctant to just say, we screwed that up. How can you do that well?
Well, pride's a real thing. I think a lot of people are too prideful to admit that they made a mistake. I think owning something is easy. I mean, just truly be sorry, say you're sorry, and then show them what you're going to do to make sure it never happens again. I think that's the one thing people often miss is they might be apologetic, they might apologize, but they just want to get through the situation, and then they never put the work in to update the process, do more training, whatever it is to actually make sure that that customer or other customers don't ever experience that problem. And I think that's the easy thing about business. Your process will never be 100%. Like, I think some people think that, I got to nail everything 100% right out of the gate. I'm a big fan of you have to have a process and then take customers through it. And then you're just continually learning steps you need to add, steps you need to remove, things you need to do to make it better and better. So I think the best thing you can do when you make a mistake is it's a good learning experience to look back at, is it a people problem? Is it a process problem? What is it? And then normally the answer is the follow-ups are simple. Just go do the thing you need to do to make it never happen again.
Right. And there's a lot of people do business with people ultimately. They don't business with companies and stores and restaurants. They do business with people. And you need to own that as a person and be sincere too, because the trend nowadays when you are on with customer service and the person at the other end is, I'm so sorry. I know if I were in your shoes, I would just be devastated. It's it is not that big a deal. You got to be sincere. So you can't overdo it either. You kind of need to match the level of seriousness with your response, but you want to acknowledge things quickly. You want to make sure that you're actually taking responsibility, communicating, and you have a resolution to it. You have a plan. Don't just call and say, hey, sorry that happened. That's important, but ultimately, if you want to keep that customer, you better have a plan in place.
Yeah, and I've noticed more and more too, the more we rely on technology, the more I think, I've seen people that I do business with almost act like their hands are tied. So whether it's I'm returning something and they can't give me my money back properly, or there's a danger in if you let the technology put you in a position where you're like, I'm sorry, this system won't let me do that. Even though it's the right thing to do. Now it's almost like you put it back on me, I'm sorry, I can't service you because I'm stuck at a roadblock. And then people aren't even trained to I think there's just common sense. And
there's a lot of lack of that going on too. Yeah. Well, and that just goes back to they've built a system, they've built a process for the good of the company, which is great. It makes sense. We're for doing that, but they've done it in such a way that now they can't serve the customer well.
Well, yeah, and to go back to your whole when you figure out your process, there should have been a moment in figuring that out where you would have said, this might happen. So how are we going to handle that? So again, you got to go back and you got to say, okay, well, this actually did happen now. Let's put a solution in place for that so that we don't look like fools next time a customer has to be in that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're customer focused, we want to make sure that we're trying to provide the best experiences we can. We're making it easy to do business with us, but you will screw that up. And so we want to make sure that we recover well, that we own our mistakes, and we move forward to build that long-term credibility and customer loyalty. Well, customers don't expect perfection, but they want that honesty, they want accountability, and they also want you to go kind of above and beyond. So let's talk about that on the other side of the break here. We come back, we're going to look at what going above and beyond really means. Welcome back to the Business Blueprint, wrapping up our conversation about how to better serve the customer. It's really the whole point of being in business is to provide that product, that service, and make sure that you're serving the customers the way you need to so you can grow. And we want to talk about a little bit about what it means to go above and beyond. Because it's important to meet expectations, but if you only ever just meet expectations, you're not going to get word of mouth. You're not going to get brand loyalty. You really have to go above and beyond what they are expecting from you. You've got to kind of wow them. So what does that actually mean? How can you do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. I think the biggest way is paying attention to the small things. But, gosh, probably 8 or 10 years ago, I was at the HubSpot conference. So HubSpot's our CRM tool. And their whole theme of the conference was 1 + 1 = 3. And their whole mindset behind that was they were releasing all these new features to their CRM tool. And so when they were presenting a lot of these major things that they were doing, they were saying, okay, well, basic would be this, and pretty impressive would be this, 1 + 1 = 2 would be this, but we went a whole nother level and we built this feature to do all these other amazing things or to work in a certain way. So they were, they had this, I loved the concept where they were making 1 + 1 = 3 in their mind, going above and beyond, adding things that you wouldn't have even thought of to make it that much better for the customer. And so I just love that mentality. But it's very tough to get an entire organization aligned around that. It's got to come from the top down. But I think that is the biggest X factor in what makes some businesses wildly successful, and then what makes other businesses just kind of okay or average is your ability and willingness to do all the little things that are going to make your customer's life just so much better. And so I think you really you gotta ingrain it into your culture of like, a lot of times I get frustrated when I'm out doing stuff because I feel like I'm at a business and I feel like you find someone's breaking point of where like they feel inconvenienced. And even though you're the customer, like they don't want to do those extra things because it's a pain in the butt. And you got to be willing to do that stuff. You gotta put the customer first, and you've got to do every single tiny little thing that just makes their life easy. I think that's the key.
And it is about the small stuff. I think when people hear this, they think about something that's expensive, some grand thing, freebies, whatever else. It doesn't have to be that. I mean, you go back to what we talked about the last segment of trying to map out that entire process. What are the expectations? Where can things go wrong? Well, get that baseline. What are the expectations for each step of your process? And then just go a little bit more than that. How can you make that 10% better? Well, you do that across the whole thing, and you are wildly better than the alternative.
Yeah, and you do it both on the people side and how you interact with your client, and you can do it on the technology side. So what's been fun about a lot of the AI technology is there's been a lot of ways in which we can build certain things into the process where we can make sure it gets done correctly every time, and it doesn't need to be a person doing it. But you can't lose sight of the fact, too, that we have to train our people to understand, okay, you're going to have a lot of these moments of truth in the process where the client's going to determine like, oh, wow, that was amazing, or oh, I'm kind of disappointed. And so you just got to pay attention to that stuff.
Yeah. So map out what your process is, and then determine, okay, what would it look like to do a little bit more? And it might be very small. I mean, very small things. I have a nicer waiting room than the next place, or whatever it might be. But you stack those things up; they really do matter. And often at times it's about speed and communication, attention to detail, or just kind of being aware of what their needs are.
Yeah, 1% improvement every day.
Yep.
I mean, if you can get 1% better, one little thing, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You're not going to fix a million things overnight. You're going to fix one thing today and one thing tomorrow and one thing the next day, and then you're going to look back a year later and you're going to say, wow, look at how much better our business is.
Yeah, and that's sustainable. Some big grand thing that you do once a year. I mean, it's nice to have like a client appreciation and send a gift basket. Like, that's great. Do that. That's fine. But if that's all it is to go above and beyond, that's really not going to stick the same as just day in and day out improvement.
Well, yeah, and you can either do everything, you can either pay attention to the detail and do things the right way and have rock star happy customers all the time, or you can do kind of an average job or a subpar job and then feel like you got to do things to make up for it, send them big gifts, just do things that like maybe don't matter as much if you were truly just doing a good job.
So does that mean that the things that you're doing to go above and beyond might not even register in the customer's mind at each step along the way?
It's possible. I think when you decide what those things are going to be, you have to make sure that those are things that the customer is going to appreciate. So, yeah. There are ways that you can probably waste a lot of time doing things that the customer really doesn't care about. But I think there's so many opportunities of just little, like literally things that take you 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, or just the way you say something, or there's so many little things you can do that don't cost anything. It's just a change of behavior that can mean the world of difference to the customer.
Yeah. And you can use, technology to help that along. If you've got, a CRM system that is taking in notes from previous purchases, services, experiences, whatever that you can utilize to engage that customer the next time, that can help. Are there other examples that you can utilize, different tools, different technologies to help you in doing this?
Oh, sure. I think businesses, I get them all the time, whether it's my kids' orthodontics appointment or my appointment at my naturopath. I think putting a system in place to remind me to show up on time. I'm bad at looking at my calendar sometimes. So I'm like, oh, it's pretty smart. I don't expect them to verbally call me and talk to me in person. But if they have a system that can remind me a week out, a day out, 4 hours out like that, that's a smart idea, because then it makes sure that the likelihood of me not showing up for my appointment is much less. So there's tons of ways in which you can take the person out of the equation, because it's really not the key ingredient. It's more that the activity was completed, Whether a person did it or technology did it doesn't matter. But then again, there are some things where it matters that a person has a human interaction, and you just have to understand which is which.
Yeah. And so why is consistency in these things more important than just these big grand gestures?
Well, consistency is key. I mean, I think when you work with a business, you want the same experience every time. And so I think one of my big fears is always like, I don't want the same customer to get a different experience working with different departments, or I don't want every customer that comes in the door to get a slightly different experience from us. I mean, there's going to be room for variation on purpose in the process, but for us to be a well-oiled machine and be good at what we do, we have to make sure we have good process in place to make sure it's consistent.
Yeah, and just you need to, again, it's people do business with people. Think about it in terms of relationships. If you have a growing friendship and there's one guy that helps you move every 3 years, which is great, and there's somebody else that's just day in, day out part of your life, helpful, looks out for you, like that relationship is going to grow a lot stronger than someone who does some really big thing, even if it's really appreciated really sporadically.
Yep.
You're going to default into that relationship that has just the repetition, the predictability, the consistency, and you want to do the same thing across your brand as well.
Yeah, and again, like we talked about going above and beyond, there's so many ways you can do it. Like in our business, when we build websites for people, one big thing is like, where's the domain name? Where's their DNS records? These are all like highly technical things that most of our clients are like, oh, we have no idea and we don't even know what you're talking about. Well, how can we go above and beyond? We just do it all for them. We're like, hey, just put us in touch with the right person. We'll talk to them.
Yep. We'll
figure out the changes that need to be made. We'll make sure that it's renewed every year, whatever it is. And then they don't have to worry about it. That's a way that we go above and beyond.
Right.
So there's so many ways you can do it.
Yeah. And ultimately, what's the long-term impact of doing this well?
More business, easier growth. Everything's just easier. Everything's easier.
That's right. Well, we'll see you next time for the next episode of the Business Blueprint.